session is titled The Case for Haptic Props, Shape, Weight, and Vibro-tactile Feedback. The paper was written by Michael White, James Game, Ulysse Vimont, and Daniel Lochner, all from the University of Cape Town, and James Game will be presenting.
Thank you, Remy. Thank you, Remy. Unfortunately, the first author can't present. He's sitting in an exam at the moment, and I'm sure he'd much prefer to be here. And so I'm presenting on his behalf. First of all, what exactly are haptic props? If we're going to make a case for them, we should at least know what they are. These are, in virtual reality, a situation where you have a physical shape that mirrors the virtual shape. So, for example, a gun or a fire hose or a microphone or something that you're holding. It's often a handheld tool, very widely used in games, dating back to the days of arcade games, but also useful outside of games. So here's a typical haptic prop, a gun, but you also use them in scientific visualization where you might want to control a cutting plane or some kind of tool around a dice-shaped haptic prop. What they do is they provide kinesthetic feedback, but also tactile feedback. So by tactile feedback, I mean the feel of the shape itself. How does it actually conform to your hand? What is the underlying texture of it? By kinesthetics, we mean the sort of heft of the shape. So if you're going to swing this or move it in some way, how does it feel when you're doing that movement? They generally don't support force reflecting feedback. So a haptic prop which has some kind of armature attached to it isn't the thing that we're considering here. You can do rumble response. Sometimes you would add motors into it, and if you hit something, you get sort of a jolt. But that's quite different from force reflecting feedback. So that's what I mean by a haptic or tangible prop. What's the situation with research into these? Well, there's quite strong evidence that if you have a force reflecting haptic feedback, that does improve performance in various ways. So an earlier author talked about molecular docking. This is a classic case where if you have force reflecting feedback, your performance improves quite dramatically because you would be sort of searching for the puzzle fit, and at the same time the forces would guide you into what was a good fit. Here's a very, very old experiment at UNC Chapel Hill where they had not just force reflecting haptics but an environment which gave passive feedback. It's a cliff edge experiment. So you'd walk over to a hole in the floor and you'd feel much more present if there was a small ledge there. And much more scared about stepping off it. More recently, haptics has gone in the direction of a focus on generalizable haptics in two ways. The first is retargeting and the second is reconfiguration. So retargeting, basically you have some shape in the scene and you want to reuse it in different ways. So the classic one is you have a small cube and you want to build some kind of puzzle out of multiple cubes and you are just having that single cube. What they do is they visually warp the virtual environment so that when you reach for multiple cubes, you're actually being redirected to the single cube. This is because vision is so compelling, overriding of other forms of feedback. So that's retargeting. The problem is if you move too fast when this vision is being warped, you can detect it quite easily. So it tends to be slow movement, it tends to be sort of finger touches, as you would see in this parabolic dish here. So when you touch some surface, you're actually being redirected. For example, if it's a vertical touch like that, you're redirected to the bottom of the parabolic dish. Reconfiguration, that's using a device which can reconfigure on the fly by shifting its weight internally. Can't see it too well because of the cutoff here, but there is this device here where it's got a metal weight in the center that can be shifted backwards and forwards, basically changing the moment of inertia of the device. And you can change your props accordingly. Okay, so that's a little bit of previous work. What is interesting to me is that given that virtual reality actually has quite a compelling controller at the moment, we are talking about the Oculus Rift controller or the HTC Vive controller, these devices are actually pretty good. They track with a fair degree of accuracy the position of the controller, you have various buttons, joysticks, and so on. Given that situation, are actual haptic props beneficial? We don't know this. This hasn't been tested, in fact. So, in the general sense, is it better to have an application-specific haptic prop, depending on what you're doing? And if that's the case, which particular properties of the haptic prop are important? So, we could have different properties. We could have the tactile feedback from the shape, the texture. We could also add weight to the haptic prop. We could have some kind of rumble response. Which of these are really important for both performance, task performance, and also for a sense of presence or immersion in the virtual environment? Obviously, that's a really broad question, so we want to look at specifics. And what we did is we tested with a baseball bat game situation. And the particular things we're looking at is game experience and performance in that game. Performance specifically, how fast or hard you actually hit the baseball. Our treatments, so this is tested using a user experiment, and we used 4 treatments. The base is the controller, the HTC Vive controller, without any haptics enabled. We then added a simple unweighted tracked bat handle, so it looks more or less like this. I had an interesting time being used to customs. What it is basically is a baseball bat cut down to a shorter length, about 28 centimeters, with a metal thread attached. And we put an HTC Vive tracker on the end of that, which I didn't bring with me. So that gives you the passive tactile feedback of the bat handle, the texture of the wood under your hand, and so on. But it's unweighted, so it doesn't reflect the actual weight of the baseball bat. Then we added metal discs onto that to get more or less the correct weighting for a baseball bat. So that's this third condition here, which I call WPOP. And the final treatment was to add simple force feedback in terms of motors which activate when the ball is hit. Of course, this isn't actually all the possibilities. So we've selected 4 out of a range of 8 particular treatments. For example, we didn't actually enable with the Vive controller rumble response there. We could have added weight to the Vive controller. There are 8 different combinations, and we only used 4. And the reason for that is fatigue. So you don't want to have user experiment that goes on beyond an hour, particularly when people are doing something quite active, such as hitting baseball. So we had fatigue concerns, and that was the reason for this design. What is the task? The task is to hit a baseball. I don't know if anybody's played baseball, but actually this is quite difficult. So you want to actually slow down the speed of the baseball quite significantly. We tried it with the kind of speeds of a proper baseball pitcher, and nobody could hit the baseball. Also, you don't want to try and hit a curveball, because that's really quite unpredictable and also rather difficult. So, reasonable speeds, but no curveballs. In each particular treatment, they were to hit 50 of these balls. And I should note that each particular subject in the experiment gets exposed to all of the different treatments. So they use all the different devices, they just do them in different orders. So we randomize the order in which they're exposed to them. It's reasonable fidelity, it's a UT baseball stadium, we've got an animated picture, we use physics and so on. You can see it here. So this is a player using the HPRP, the haptic version. And you can see looking around and see where the ball goes and so on. You can see also that the score is tracked in terms of the distance you hit. So it's more or less like a game with appropriate feedback. A few more experiment details. So we had N equal 42 participants. This is a convenience sample, so we just basically got university students with the typical age range that you would expect from that. We chose students who were computer literate because we found with non-computer literate subjects in the past that the exposure to virtual reality is so exciting for them that it overwhelms any kind of other effect. At the same time, we don't want to have people who are too experienced in virtual reality because they have too much familiarity with controllers. And so that's going to bias the results. So we pre-screened our subjects accordingly. What did we measure? We measured their game experience. So this is things like immersion, negative affect, positive affect. It's quite a useful questionnaire. We used the core game experience questionnaire. in order that we didn't take too long with the questionnaire component, given that they had to have 4 treatments. We also checked performance in 2 ways. One was hit ratio, so if they even contacted the baseball, that would score a positive hit. The others would be a miss, and we took the ratio between those. We also recorded the mean distance of all their hits over the 50 baseball pitches. And then finally, to try and test immersion, we looked at what pose they adopted. So the baseball batters have a particular characteristic pose, which is side on to the pitcher, holding the bat with 2 hands. And we were looking to see if that actually occurred. And then we did sort of typical analysis of this kind of experiment using ANOVA. If we didn't get a normal distribution, we would use a freedom test instead. And because pose is an ordinal quantity, we had to use a confidence Q test for that. But the details of that are on the paper that you can read. So what are the results? Starting with the game experience questionnaire, which has 7 sub-items. So from left to right, competence, immersion, flow, tension, challenge, negative affect, and positive affect. And you can see the 4 different treatments here. 4 different treatments are the control in red, the prop, this is the unweighted prop in green, the weighted prop in cyan, and in purple, the haptic and weighted prop. What is competence? Competence is how well you feel you're doing in the game. Immersion is how, it's pretty similar to presence, is how the royal goes away when you play the game. Flow, that's the standard game flow definition. You are not aware of time as you play the game. Tension is, it's not a physical tension, it's more an emotional tension, that you don't feel that this is a good game, so that's a negative quantity. Challenge is how challenged you feel about the game, obviously. Negative affect is a negative emotional response, and positive affect is a positive emotional response. And at the bottom you can see, highlighted in red, the quantities for which we got significance, with Pearson's R, which tells you the effect size for that. And you can see there's quite a lot of significance in this experiment. The takeaways here are that if you compare the control condition with the prop, there is no significance there. So an unweighted bat handle is not improving game experience over the standard controller. Likewise, there's not any significant difference between the haptic prop that's adding the rumble response to the weighted response. That's the bottom line there. But when we compare things like the controller and the weighted prop and so on, we get with the positive dimensions. So these here, these 5 here are the ones for which they were significant. Most of the positive dimensions we get either medium to high effect size with significance. So this tells us, in fact, that actually having a weighted prop does improve the game experience, and to quite a large degree. Turning to performance and pose. So there's no significant difference between the hit ratios, but there is significant difference in the mean distance of the hits. So this not only improves the game experience, it actually improves the player's performance in the game, and that they can hit further over time. So you can see the improvement there. And again, it is a medium to large effect. We found no difference in facing, so they sort of more or less randomly faced the pitcher or didn't face the pitcher. But there's a small effect size for the grip. So whether they use a single-handed or two-handed grip. And that depends on whether they're using the prop, this prop, which kind of has a feeling of you want to use it in 2 hands, versus the controller, which was tended to be one-handed. Okay, so what are the implications of this? Well, the implications are that there is significant difference between using the standard controller and using a prop for the specific case of the baseball game. So I wouldn't want to generalize this too widely. I think you need to test this with different kinds of props to get a general effect here. But I think it would generalize to hitting props. So if you're using other kinds of bats, it'd probably be safe to generalize to those. Interesting for me is that there's actually a significant improvement in performance. And I think this is because people can judge the swing better if they've got a weighted prop in their hand. They take the experience from real life and they take it over to virtual reality and are able to predict where the ball is going to be and the motion of the swing much better with a weighted prop. I would be careful about saying that the grip is significant, because I think it has more to do with the affordances of the actual device than a sense of immersion. What are the limitations? Well, it's a relatively narrow class of prop. We need to do more experimentation. And we only tested 4 of the 8 device configurations, but we chose those quite carefully. We chose them because we thought they were the most important, particular device configurations. What is the take-home from this? If I was designing a prop, particularly a larger prop, I would choose to have a weighted, tracked prop. And I think weight is really important. And particularly adjustable weight. So one of the things that happened was people got quite tired with a fully weighted prop over time. So you might want to have some kind of way of very quickly adjusting the weight if you're designing similar haptic props. Okay, any questions?
For one, I was curious, maybe I missed it. The participants that you had, what kind of experience did they have swinging bats? Did you calibrate?
Yeah, so that's the details of that on the paper. Yeah, we did test for that. We actually had a pre-questionnaire where we got some of the demographics of the participants. Some of them had swung a baseball bat before, but none of them were experienced baseball players. So they're students from South Africa, and baseball is the big game in South Africa. However, cricket is a very big game in South Africa, so all of them had quite a lot of experience in swinging bats in general, just not with baseball bats.
And actually, the other question that I had was, given that you found so much significance with the weights, as somebody that has swung a lot of bats myself, I was wondering, I find actually the moment of inertia would almost be kind of more relevant than the weight in some sense. That sense of swing comes from the moment. So is that something you're thinking of for the future? Or?
Yeah, so we did actually consider that. Again, the details of the paper. It does not have the same moment of inertia as a true baseball bat. We did actually a pre-experiment where we tested different moments of inertia. And this is a somewhat lighter version of the bat, because that was favored in the pre-experiment. But yeah, it's clearly a big concern. The moment of inertia design of this has all the weights at the end, as far away from the start as you can get. By the way, we didn't use a full-length baseball bat because you really don't want to be swinging a full-length baseball bat around a virtual reality experiment. So there's a reason we cut it down. So it has some of the same properties, but not exactly the same as a real baseball bat. But you're quite right, that moment of inertia is pretty crucial. This, of course, has a pretty much a linear inertial distribution. Other haptic props will be quite different in that respect. Yes?
Did you perform any analysis for the learning effect between modalities? For example, like the learning effect for you had 50 trials, right? The first pitch to the 50th pitch.
Yeah.
And then there were some learning effects, like the first edition, then they started missing it, and then they started. So between modalities, did you do any kind of analysis?
We did no formal learning effect checks. So we didn't do a lot of confounding factor analysis as one of the confounding factors that you're talking about. But of course we do compensate for the learning effect by randomly commuting the order in which they're exposed to the different treatments. So there's compensation for that, but we do not check the actual improvement in performance. But there was some. I just can't quantify it because it's more a sort of qualitative feel of how much better they got over time.
Thanks.
Thank you.